Merci à mesdames et messieurs.
We sincerely want to thank the ladies and gentlemen, photographers, to be settled before we start with the proceedings.
Le terrorisme et l'extrémisme violent
Terrorism and violent extremism are encompassing our borders. How can we bring in all our cooperative efforts so as to combat against this devastating plight? It's because of that we are meeting here, and Togo is honored to welcome this workshop. Your Excellency, the chairperson of the General Assembly and of Togo, and the Speaker of the Republic of Liberia, Your Excellency, the representatives of Interparliamentary Union, and President of the African Parliamentary Union, and President of the Senate of Zimbabwe, Mr. President of the National Assemblies of Togo, Madam President, and ladies and gentlemen, ministers of the Republic of Togo, Excellencies, diplomatic corps and traditional chiefs, you are all welcome to this high-level parliamentary conference on terrorism that our country is honored to host. We will listen to 5 interventions, and after that there will be the intervention of the Koya of Lome before we move on to the opening of this meeting. But before then, we want to welcome the different delegations that participating in this workshop, and I would like to invite you to commend them and make a round of applause for them when we call them. We have the delegation of the Republic of Algeria. A round of applause for them. It's true that the list is very long, but it's also a proof of the others. Burkina Faso is next. We welcome a Cameroon delegation of Côte d'Ivoire, Djibouti, Egypt, the Gambia, Ghana, of Guinea, the Comoros, Mauritius, Kenya, Liberia, Mali, Morocco, Niger, Nigeria, the Central Republic of Africa, Rwanda, Chad, Zimbabwe, and obviously Togo, the hosting country. We further welcome the delegations of the APU, as well as those of Arabic Interparliamentarian Association, Arab Parliamentary, ECOWAS Parliament, Parliamentary Association for Security and Cooperation in Europe, as well as the Mediterranean Parliamentary Assemblies. thank you for this marathon in which you are engaged with us. We will now listen to the first intervention, and which will be the first of the chairperson of the Speaker of the National Assembly of Niger, and representatives of the presidents of the Interparliamentary Committee of the G5 Sahel. So let's listen to His Excellency Mr. Seni Omaru.
Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée nationale togolaise, honorable représentant du Conseil, Speaker of the Honorable Representative of the Quetta Shura Council, ladies and gentlemen, member of the government, Deputy Director of United Anti-Terrorism Bureau, honorable and distinguished traditional chief rulers, honorable MPs, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before any word, I'd like to express my gratitude to the National Assembly of Togo, and more specifically to its Speaker, Mrs. Yawa Djibouti Tsega, for the warm and friendly welcome that my delegation and myself have received upon arriving in this beautiful city of Lomé. I'd like to greet and thank the organizers of this important meeting, notably the United Nations Anti-Terrorism Office, the African Parliamentary Union, and the Council of Shura of the State of Qatar. Dear colleagues, to arrive to this conference, I'd like to first greet or underscore the relevance of this in the particular context of the Sahelian zone, which is seriously troubled by this war. Indeed, today, terrorism imposes on our country a real scourge which does not spare any strata of the society. Now, to find its origin, we have resolved to combat it with the support of our habitual partners. We have recorded many victories, and the fear that terrorism used to bring in our areas is gradually dissipating. In some of our countries, the evil forces have even been withdrawing. However, we have to acknowledge that despite all the strikes that we have dealt them, all the blows that we've dealt them, the monster is still alive because it has developed important mutation capabilities. Indeed, the nebulous terrorists, despite the losses that they record here and there, succeed to regenerate, changing its form and their approach. Thus, when they did not succeed in conquering territories, they borrow the methods of great banditry, racketing, armed attack, and ransom taking. Is to say that terrorism represents a menace that can go across our borders. It is regretful that up until now, the moving undercover because they are not they not claim any of the acts. Daily, there's a threat to our social peace, and there's this constant tension that degenerates in our community. It is instability for the state institutions, but it is above all a strong hindrance to development, the consequences of which is the stop of agricultural production in all the frontline regions, the forced migration, clandestine migration, and the aggravation of poverty. Madam Speaker, this stage being set, we now need to deal with the problematics which the combination between youth and terrorism bring. I think that this is certainly an avenue of solution to bring this phenomenon to an end. Indeed, it can be observed that those who carry the weapons against our compatriots are young people when they are not at the origin of the while they're not at the origin of the phenomenon. They are the armed. So the solution is not to oppose them to their siblings. Should we not, before anything, try to interrogate ourselves on the progress that brings the youth to get to this extreme? Answering this interrogation is not easy because several parameters have to be taken into account. First, we have the shortfalls of the formal educations, particularly in rural areas. Then we have the exacerbation of poverty, which leads to rapid unemployment for youth, worsened by inadequation between the demographic weight and the economy. As way of illustrations, as I speak, in Niger, 60% of the population is under the age of 18, and every year comes on the market 500,000 new job seekers, which the national economy cannot absorb. Consequently, from one year to the other, the mass of youth without employment continue to increase, with the risk for this youth to become subject to all the challenges to public order. Quite obviously, all these youth do not become terrorists or delinquents, but they remain the targets of all the criminal organizations which deal with illegal trafficking of weapons, psychotrope substances, and human. It has been observed that the recruits of terrorists are usually unemployed youth, which are lured by false promises of rapid enrichment and with the blessings of God on top of it. So we have to rethink the whole problematics of your youth. The strategic approach should take into account the new parameters such as the important change of mentality brought about by the propulsion of information technology and communication technologies. Indeed, today, thanks to portable telephones, even the rural youth living in the most remote areas have a big opening on the world, and this has a big impact on their dreams and aspirations. The programs and projects dealing with them must be more innovative than they were in the past. They have to, above all, rely on a better citizenry training and recalibrating around local realities. Now, I believe that the best way to empower the youth in the front of terrorism is first to prepare them to better resist the luring of the terrorist network, which use them as the youth has to find the psychological force to position themselves as adversaries of terrorism and contribute to their failure. We have therefore to propose the youth real alternatives by involving them at all levels. To this respect, the experience of Niger leveraging on the creation of a National Council of the Youth could be useful. Indeed, youth federated through these councils are feel more responsible and empowered on all the questions concerning them. These councils has today acquired a lot of visibility to become gradually the spokesperson which is listened to by the government as well as the National Assembly for all issues dealing with youth. In addition to this organized framework, I believe that to make the youth better actors, aware of their duties in the challenges of our days, we have to act upstream by giving ourselves the means to ensure our children education that is adapted to the needs of our society. It will certainly be necessary to revisit all the schools curricula, with refocusing on our realities, social and economical. school. No doubt will it be important to go to the early orientations of the essential for students toward professional training and reserve the access to higher studies to the better student by generations. For those who have left schools and those who are in the rural areas, massive investment have to be made to develop further entrepreneurship avenues adapted to their conditions with the aim to reduce joblessness and vulnerability of the youth. The objective, notwithstanding, will be to reduce the condition that lead the youth to despair, which puts them to to unfortunate extremities. To this effect, I'd like to evoke and take gratitude for that, the role of the Niger experiment, which is the High Commission to the Restoration of Peace, autonomous authority, which with the support of the state and our development partners have been taking actions on the field. The objective of it is to reinsert all the youth thanks to high labor activities. The repented terrorists, particularly, are taken into account in the respect of their dignity. Madam Speaker, our actions, the other immediate action which could concur to make the youth would be to incorporate this youth in our defense forces. This experience has proven conclusive in Niger in the face of Boko Haram, the region of Difa. Indeed, the recruit, knowing better the fields and the enemy, which looks at them, have proven to be very efficient, both in matters of information as well as on the theater of operations. Madam Speaker, if it is the duty of the government to directly take into account the youth problematics, what would be the contribution of us parliamentarians? In my opinion, the first duty of the parliamentarian is to support the strategies of the executive authorities, without losing sight of their constitutional prerogatives. They have to enforce, to make sure to adapt the national legislation to the situations derived from the consequence of the terrorism. The member of parliament, individually taken, has to initiate laws that could more incite youth to integrate active life. In the context of his representative missions, the parliamentarian has to go more toward the youth through sensitization campaigns on citizenry and civism. And it is this context that the National Assembly of Niger has been continuing the experience of youth parliamentarians, which is a real these junior parliamentarians, designated among the best of the school settings, receive from the National Assembly a support that is based on the knowledge of their countries, on their challenges and their potentials. And the result in the end is that in their respective milieu, they become models, references that we can draw inspirations from. In the context of their legislative prerogatives, Parliament can also encourage the support of youth against terrorism by allocating funds in restructuring projects that can involve them at all levels. Equally, they should support to the budget the national strategies and regional strategies for the prevention of violent extremism and the mitigation of terrorism. Moreover, at the individual level, the National Assembly should invite all the members of parliament to conduct in their immediate environments sensitization missions for youth during off seasons. Madam Speaker, at the multilateral level, at the Sahel region, the Inter-Parliamentary Committee of G5 should take measures to revisit the relevance and the coherence and financial impact through the investment that development partners have promised to finance. We invite the Secretariat of G5 to better orient their activity toward the youth. Madam Speaker, as far as meetings such as the one that brings us to get together, they are beautiful opportunity to share the good practices from one country to the other. They help us widen their target of advocacies in direction of the international community, so that all the countries of the world can be convinced that the terrorist issues transcends all borders. The other benefit of this meeting is above all, that of reaffirming the necessity of parliamentarians involving themselves in the fight against terrorism. Commitment which goes without saying, because you can only win this war through the efficient commitment of the populations. And do this through those who have been received the mandate to protect the state. Madam Chair, I'm not here to exhaust the debate by myself. I'd like to now give you the floor while thanking you once again for having invited me in this beautiful country to participate in this very important meeting for our sub-regions, very important for the programs and projects, and very important for the whole world, dare I say. I thank you. We thank the Speaker of the National Assembly of Niger, who's the chair of the G5 Sahel parliamentarians, who has set the stage on this debate, which is on terrorism and the role of youth, and the different solutions that have already been tried out by the sister republic of Niger. This high-level conference is being organized in collaborations, notably with the Shura Council from the state of Qatar. I'd like to now invite you to listen to a member of this council, Shura Councils, and so we're going to listen to the address of His Excellency Saad bin Ahmed.
الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سعادة السيدة رئيسة الاتحاد البرلماني الأفريقي السيدة ميبل سينومونا، سعادة السيدة رئيسة الجمعية الوطنية في جمهورية توغو الصديقة السيدة ياوا تيسغان، سعادة السيد نائب مدير مكتب مكافحة الإرهاب الاتحادات البرلمانية، السيدات والسادة الأفاضل، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يشرفني أن أتناول الكلمة أمام الجمع الهام باسم مجلس الشورى في دولة قطر.
I have the privilege to talk to this assembly on behalf of the Council of Shura from the state of Qatar, and I have the privilege to extend to you the greetings from His Excellency Hassan bin Abdullah Dermi, and we are grateful to you, Your Excellencies, members of the Council. I also want to extend my best wishes to the participants to this meeting. My speech focuses on 2 points. The first point is the role of the youth in the fight against terrorism and violent extremisms. I now focus on the work of our parliaments. When it comes to the youth, we know that the youth are about the 2/3 of the populations of African countries. They also represent active groups who work for the progress of African countries. They are also able to build sustainable development for our countries. And together, these objectives can be achieved following very good objectives. So if the fight against terrorism has to do with all the categories of our people, it also includes our youth. Our youth is vital. Our youth should be trained in a balanced manner, and they have to be ready to fight, to work hard to fight terrorism and any form of violent extremism, and be ready to participate in the fight against this terrorism and work together in compliance with religious value. The role of the youth is important in the development process in Africa and all over the world. And consequently, we have some diseases which are threats. So we have to play our part and make sure that the youth play a positive role in the fight against the dangers that our society are exposed to, and also fight against the hindrances to sustainable development and the progress of our countries. The second point is the launch of this parliamentarian group. We want to thank you. We want to thank the UN for establishing this process of fighting against terrorism. It is obvious that terrorism is a global phenomenon, and the consequences of this plague is huge. So this parliamentarian group to fight this challenge in Africa is working, and we want to encourage their work. We want to encourage initiatives to contribute to the international endeavors to eradicate terrorism and violent extremism, to build peace in Africa and in the world. I also want to refer to the other directives of His Alters Sheikh Amir. The state of Qatar kept on supporting physically and morally all the UN activities, especially when it comes to fighting terrorism and violent extremism. And there is a work being done for peace building and to reinforce international security, which is very, very important for us to achieve the sustainable goals. Mr. Antonio Guterres, the General Secretary, the Secretary General for the UN, has stressed the role played by Qatar in the fight against terrorism and in the international endeavors to fight against the hot points of terrorism all over the world, and also to promote international cooperation and peaceful cohabitation, and to fight all the challenges according to the Charter of the UN. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, allow me to express my gratefulness. I would like to thank the Togolese Republic, the Parliament of Togo, the government of Togo. Allow me to thank them for a warm welcome. I also want to thank the UN office in charge of fighting terrorism. I also want to thank the high officials and the state of Qatar, which has the support of the Shura because of the work. We want to thank all the parliamentarians from the world. We want to work to unite all the communities to fight terrorism and extreme terrorism. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Monsieur le membre du Conseil de la Shura de l'État du Qatar d'apporter ainsi, comme il l'a clairement présenté, la contribution de son État à la lutte contre le terrorisme et l'extrémisme violent, notamment au travers de cette conférence.
We thank the office of the United Nations, the UNOCT, for their support. So we'd like to listen to the speech of Mr. Mauro Miedico, the Deputy Director of UNOCT.
Le micro de l'intervenant, s'il vous plaît. Le micro de l'intervenant, s'il vous plaît. Le micro de l'intervenant, s'il vous plaît.
Et en particulier, bien sûr, le Conseil de la Shura de l'État du Qatar, l'Union parlementaire africaine et Madame la Présidente de l'Union, ainsi que le Secrétaire général de l'Union, le Comité
The microphone of the speaker, please. We are not getting a speaker in the booth. The microphone of the speaker, please.
Toujours, en commençant par l'Union interparlementaire, et Monsieur le Président, l'honorable Pacheco, ainsi que l'organisation de l'OSCE et son assemblée parlementaire, l'honorable Lopatka, la PAM, le Parlement arabe, l'Union interparlementaire.
Oh, sorry for the delay. It's now we're receiving the voice of the speaker. I would like to thank all of you members of the Parliament for being here present with us this very day. 18 months ago, we started a parliamentary commitment process, and this thanks to the unfatigable support of Qatar, and by establishing a national office to fight against terrorism in Qatar. And it's thanks to that bureau or office that we started working with the parliamentarians. And we were luckily, and we have the pleasure to work with them last March in Doha, and it was focused on Africa, and it dealt with the threats and challenges raised by the terrorist group in Africa. There were many recommendations that were developed during that very conference. First, most attention was paid to the support to those who are victims for terrorist actions, and this was a concern for all the parliamentarians, and therefore we were pleased to hold a conference for the African countries as well as other countries, in particular other part of the world, with the Italian Parliamentary last year in Italy. And we had template and models for those who are victims of terrorism, and that will be adopted by the MPs. The second aspect of the recommendation of Doha focused on the commitment and the role of women in the fight against terrorism, namely the commitment of parliamentarian women. And it was therefore based on that the state of Qatar and the Shura will invite you all to come to Doha for a meeting which will be held next month with the head of the chair of Doha for the commitment of women against terrorism. Thirdly, they recommended to establish a working group for Africa composed of African parliamentarians, and this is what we are going to do tomorrow, and that working group will be a permanent working group that will meet at least once per month, and if possible twice a year, so as to have a guideline and strategic template to work on African MPs for the commitment and the fight against terrorism, about our commitment to us all. Fourthly, it was underscored to take urgently of the issue of the recruiting of the youth, and the fact that terrorists are targeting mostly the population, that the youth in particular in Africa. And this was the issue on which we are working today during this conference here in Lomé. All these recommendations were also discussed, and instead of having during the many meetings that were held for the meeting of G5 Sahel, which was held in Chad, the meeting of the General Assembly of the APU that was held in Zimbabwe, in the city of Victoria Falls, under the auspices of the Speaker of Zimbabwe. And this was a pleasure for us to see these recommendations being implemented right from today. Now, allow me to switch off into English.
Greatest pleasure to welcome you all to this high-level parliamentary counter-terrorism and prevention of violent extremism conference on youth engagement in Africa. We have seen very worrying reports in the last 2 years, particularly the counter-terrorism index, which has identified first that most of the terrorist attacks have occurred in conflict countries, and most of them were in Africa. Second, there has been a very worrying increase of the number of terrorist attacks, and particularly a penetration of terrorist groups in most of the African countries. And thirdly, we see with strong preoccupation the penetration of terrorist activities going down from the Sahel into the coastal countries. And Togo is just an example of that, a country which has been always peaceful and stable, and that has for the first time learned, even on his own population, how the suffering could be produced by terrorist attacks, which unfortunately occurred even in Togo. We are therefore most preoccupied about this expansion of terrorist activities in the world continent, and they've put a lot of efforts directly also from the guidance of our Secretary General and in our office, the Office of Counterterrorism of the United Nations, to put Africa at the center of all our engagement and support to all of our member states. And it is clear that this penetration of terrorist activities in the African continent targets as a priority the youth population. And Africa, of course, has the highest youth population in the world, and there is therefore a very serious challenge in terms of preventing radicalization that targets particularly the youth. We need structural responses to this, and this is the reason why today, and through the work of the working group that we establish tomorrow, we need to debate about what can be done more from a much more strategic perspective. In our point of view, we need two priority action areas. First, we need to work with communities, and there is no better response than working with parliamentarians. You represent the communities, and we need to go to communities. In Doha last year, President and Speaker Humed of Djibouti stressed the importance of what he called the caravans, that we need to bring parliamentarians and international organizations to rural area, to meet with community, to hear from them and bring responses that only if structured in a continued way can help and prevent youth in particular to be radicalized or be even sensible to the appealing messages of terrorist organization. And the second is to work with civil organization. I'm most pleased that we have a number of civil organization representatives in this conference and overall in the work we conduct. These are priority actions we would like to discuss with you. We have started also a process not only of technical support to all African governments and countries, and we have a number of programs that are, of course, already implemented and that provide very technical and specialized support to all of your national institutions. But we have also started a process of political engagement, and this will bring us this year in October in Nigeria to host a summit, a presidential summit on the fight against terrorism in Africa. But we want to inject a parliamentary component in that summit to ensure that also the voices of parliamentarians are very well heard. And this process and this conference today, it's another step towards bringing this structured process and responses into the summit late this fall. I look forward to the results also of the working group that will need to define also priority of action and share good practices. And I know myself, been discussing with Madam the President of the Togo National Assembly, that a strong emphasis is being put here as an example in Togo to rural community, to development with a special emphasis of youth and youth engagement. These examples are what we want to hear, and we want to also not only comment but replicate elsewhere. I am sure, as you all, that youth are certainly not only the leaders of tomorrow, but they are the drivers of change of today. And we count particularly on the young parliamentarians for promoting engagement with youth, and we need to hear from the youth to give them sustainable responses. Thank you very much.
Merci à Monsieur le directeur adjoint du Bureau des Nations.
Thank you, Director, for the UNOCT. What we know is to, during this meeting, is to think of having an effective action for this, during this meeting towards the youth, and to continue with the co-organizers of this event. I would like to invite you to listen to the IPU, and this will be the APU. The speech will be delivered by Madam Mabel Chinomona from Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator. Your Excellency, Madam Chega Yawa, Speaker of the National Assembly of Togo, Mem. Honorable Saad bin Ahmed Al Mesnet, Member of the Shura Council of the State of Qatar. Your Excellency, Mr. D. Pacheco, President of the Interparliamentary Union, Your Excellencies, Speakers and Presidents of Parliaments here present, Mr. Mauro Medieco, Deputy Director of the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Office, Ms. Reinhold Lopatka, Chairman of the Ad Hoc Committee on Terrorism of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and Chairman of the Mechanism for Parliamentary Engagement. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, particularly women participants. On behalf of the Senate of the Parliament of Zimbabwe, on behalf of the APU, African Parliamentary Union, and on my own behalf, I would like to express my gratitude to Your Excellency, Madam Chegan Yawa, Speaker of the National Assembly of Togo, for accepting to host this high-level conference. The excellent arrangements and courtesies accorded to delegates since our arrival in Lome are a clear testimony of the warm hospitality of the people of Togo, and we naturally feel at home. Furthermore, I wish to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the Shura of the State of Qatar for its unwavering support and coordination efforts in the fight against terrorism. It would be remiss of me not to pay homage to the exemplary partnership as demonstrated by the Shura of the State of Qatar, the United Nations Office for Countering Terrorism and Violent Extremism, the CIP G5 Sahel, and the African Parliamentary Union. Their joint efforts have made it possible for the establishment of a framework of cooperation for parliamentarians as we dialogue and exchange experiences in the fight against terrorism. The fight against terrorism calls for collective action among stakeholders, including parliamentarians as representatives of the people. Honorable members, as parliamentarians, we are the first port of call in representing our people in their diverse interests. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, terrorism is arguably Africa's greatest security threat. According to the Global Terrorism Index of 2022, Sub-Saharan Africa accounted for 48% of global terrorism deaths. 4 of the 10 countries with the largest increases in deaths from terrorism are also in Sub-Saharan Africa. The rise of terrorism in Africa has created severe security threats, as this growing phenomenon has resulted in destruction and instability in the countries and regions where terrorist groups operate. Furthermore, terrorism and violent extremism pose threats not only to the values of democratic societies, but also to the freedom of citizens. These multidimensional challenges can only be met with robust bilateral and international cooperation between states. Parliamentarians, as representatives of the people, make the principal stakeholders in efforts of countering terrorism. It is again this background that today's theme is central and of critical importance, particularly as it also focuses on the involvement of young people in the fight against terrorism. It also aims at creating synergies between parliamentarians and young people in their commitment to the fight against terrorism. To a large extent, young people are the first victims of terrorism and violent extremism, as they are the main target of recruitment by terrorists, depriving them of their bright future. According to recent statistics, Africa has the largest number of young people in the world. It is estimated that by 2050, a third of the world's young people will live in sub-Saharan Africa. Youth employment statistics are staggering in Africa, with between 80 to 90% of young people in the informal sector. Additionally, 3 million formal jobs are created each year out of 10 to 12 million young people in the labor market. This endemic unemployment should challenge our conscience as elected officials. In such an environment of uncertainty, lack of employment, poor governance that leaves little room for political openness, young people feel marginalized and becomes easy targets for all adventures and dream sellers. Indeed, dear colleagues, we are faced with this painful reality, and it becomes imperative to deeply reflect on the issue of youth unemployment, and in that context, proffer recommendations for possible adoption by our parliaments. Young people must be provided with the means to enable them to realize their economic potential. The approach must be holistic, providing training and employment, encouraging entrepreneurship among the youths, and availing financing at concessional rates, among other strategies. This will assist in calming our sometimes rather edgy and agitated youth. Furthermore, it is essential to involve young people in the fight against terrorism because of the invaluable contribution they can make to conflict resolution and the fight against violent extremism. In this context, our approach must be inclusive by facilitating their full participation in decision-making bodies. To achieve this, it is critical to establish dialogue between parliaments and young people as part of consensus building and commitment to global peace and security. In return, young people will bring the creativity, innovation, and energy that characterize them in the search for peace and sustainable development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few suggestions that I thought would be useful to share with you. This meeting between parliamentarians and young people has provided us with an opportunity to understand the concerns of young people and their expectations in order to determine strategies to overcome current obstacles, as well as to strengthen our common commitment and resolve in the fight against terrorism. Together, we should be able to realize immense potential in summoning the youth into a powerful vanguard of socio-economic development as we move towards building an Africa that we want, as envisaged in the Agenda 2063 roadmap. Excellencies, allow me to conclude my remarks by wishing all delegates fruitful and enriching exchanges that will proffer solutions to the scourge of terrorism. Additionally, I wish to encourage parliaments to implement resolutions that will be adopted at the conclusion of the meetings, as they will give credence to our participation at these meetings. So I thank you.
Nous remercions Madame la Présidente pour ses...
We thank Madam Chair for her address, where indeed on topics and thematics that are very serious and complex. But on the lighter note, don't all these problems come from the loss of value, loss of the value of love our mother country? motherland. We are going now to take a break, which celebrates the love of our motherland, and we invite all the citizens to the love of their motherland. Eddie Nedi is going to revisit the Republican March, which is a prayer for Togo, a prayer for all Africa. It will be followed by a very small piece of the Nigba, which is the love of peace, which federates us all here this morning. Feli Nedi, the floor is yours.
De notre Togo et célébrer sa beauté. Forêt, mon site enchanteur, fleuve majestueux, torrent prestigieux, le sol merveilleux, prodigue et répond bonheur, fécondité. Soyez bénis, Togo, soyez heureux, pays de nos aïeux. Forêt, mon site enchanteur, fleuve majestueux, torrent prestigieux, le sol merveilleux, prodigue et répond bonheur, fécondité. Soyez soyez heureux, pays de nos aïeux, pays de nos aïeux. Digne paix, signe paix, t'épée, afficiwa.
Terre de nos aïeux, je ne t'oublierai jamais.
Land of our elders, I will not forget you. Thank you, our sister, for the songs. Let's come back to the serious problems of the day. And I will invite you to listen to the official speech of the Speaker of the National Assembly of Togo. I wish you a happy listening from Her Excellency Madame Yawa Jigbodi Chega. I thank you. Excellence, Madame Joel Howard Taylor, Vice President of the Republic of Liberia, the Excellency Mr. Duarte Pacheco, Chairperson of the IPU, Your Excellency Madame Mabel Chinomona, Chairperson of APU and Chairperson of Senate of Zimbabwe. Honorable Seni Umaru, Chairperson of the National Assembly of Niger and Chairperson of the CIP G5 Sahel, Your Excellency, Chairperson of Parliamentary Assemblies, Head of the Government of Togo, Your Excellency, former ministers, former MPs, ladies and gentlemen, members of the government, Mr. the Deputy Director of UNOCT, Honorable Representative of the Council of the Shura of Qatar, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, representatives of international bodies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, parliamentarians from Togo and from all other nations represented here in this conference, ladies and gentlemen, mayors, prefects, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of civil society organizations as well as youth organizations, administrative authorities, military and religious leaders, our traditional chiefs, ladies and gentlemen, the various agents of the press and all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen, I will first and foremost do my duty and a pleasant duty, which is to transmit to you the cordial and warm welcome to Togo from the Head of State, His Excellency Mr. For Sozim Nanyasingbe, during your participation at the high-level parliamentary conference on the fight against terrorism and preventing violent extremism and engaging youth in Africa. I would furthermore express all my gratitude of the gratitude of the National Assemblies of Togo, which sincerely expresses thanks to every delegation present here in Lome. I also extend my gratitude to the President of the IPU, APU, the Deputy Director of UNOCT, the representatives of the Shura Council from the Qatar, as well as the representatives of the CIP G5 Sahel, which demonstrated their full commitment and determination to find a concerted solution and effective and sustainable to the troublesome question of terrorism which gathers us here. All my gratitude to the various presidents of the parliamentary assemblies, as well as those of the head of delegation of our sister countries. Your everlasting support, our presence by our side, is a sign of your solidarity and secular fraternity, which are a connection between our different people. I would like to sincerely thank all the delegations and experts that moved down to travel to Lomé. Your contributions to the debate, as well as the commitment of each and every one of you, will surely make this parliamentary conference be that of a high level. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, being part of the long tradition of our country, tradition which aims at searching for peace and security and maintaining security at national and continental level, allow me to say that the National Assembly of Togo participated in 2022 at Doha at the high-level parliamentary conference on the topic understanding the terrorist threat in Africa. And during that meeting, Togo was called upon to offer a framework to pursue the reflections on parliamentary engagement in the fight against terrorism. On this junction, I would like to express my gratitude to the head of state, His Excellency Mr. Sozina Nyasingbe, who for his constant commitment and engagement in favor of searching peace and maintaining peace in the various nations, who also support this conference. This gratitude should be given to him for his audacious leadership and his pragmatism, be at national or international level. The recent characteristics of the result of his steps and actions taken under the sub-region are of sincere support for us, and I would like to give him a round of applause for that. On this note, I will therefore express this auspices for the head of state, for him, for being deeply attached to the diplomacy and acting multilateralism. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, as you are all aware, our continent, in consultation with different partners, always searches for a different period during his history for finding solution to multiple challenges and problems on the way. And the core center of these challenges, we could mention the modernization of the economy, development of its social infrastructures, educative and cultural, the funding and the potential of the private sector, intensification of the exchanges with the various nations all over the world, and the job opportunity for the youth, promotion and empowerment for the women, knowing that this just to mention a few. Despite these challenges, to which difficult international conjecture is added, the growth rates that are displayed by our different states show us that Africa is ready to play a crucial role for financial stability and global economy. Nevertheless, we've noticed that the frequency of violent actions linked with terrorism constitute a threat to the sustainable development of our continent. Far for asking ourselves a question on how we get to that extent, some states and international organizations have chosen to ask themselves the question how to get out of such a situation. To this extent, I'm glad of this convergence of multi-stakeholders action, so that's UN systems, global organizations, as well as continental organizations of national parliamentaries guided to search and look for means and ways that will help to solve even uproot these threats. Through this framework of exchange, we will try to bring solutions and to put in place a collective response synergy to fight against terrorism with all the vigor and the rigor that our determination will make up to have a harmonious community. I would like to commend the relevancy of the initiative to associate Parliament MPs to certain concerted solutions. In the same vein, the contribution of the civil society and youth organizations is also necessary and indispensable. How, therefore, organize this dialogue and what lever to use so as to meet the objectives that we are following? What should the youth occupy? What role should the youth play in this debate, and how to channel all the energies that the youth is equipped with so as to have a strong shield to protect our countries by finding solution to the different needs of those youth? The question is then ask, and it's therefore our duty to look for ways and means so as to offer a good and brilliant future for our youths. The question is there, and we are gathering here for 2 days, and we believe that from its importance is known by all. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, and before closing my speech, I would like to reiterate my gratitude to all the delegates who moved down to Lomé. I will also like to thank you for the confidence granted to our country to host this conference, and I want to reassure you of the determination of Togo to maintain peace and security through multi-dimensional actions, be it social or based on every other attitude. And on your behalf, I would like to reiterate our gratitude to the head of state for the support granted to the hosting of this meeting, recalling all for more mobilization from our member countries and inviting the international community for more coordinated actions in favor of peace and security. I declare open on behalf of the head of state the high-level parliament conference on the fight against and preventing violent extremism in Africa, engaging youth in countering security. Long live Africa, long live our nations. Thank you for your kind attention.
Merci à son Excellence, Madame la Présidente.
We thank the Excellency of the Excellency Speaker of Togolese MP, the National Assembly, and we would like to listen to the first roundtable on this very topic, especially in the framework of this conference on the fight against terrorism, and will invite the high table to change their position. And even during this time, we'll invite you to listen to the sketch or the funny that our youth are going to do. So we are going to listen to the songs of the choir of the University of Lome, and they are inviting all the countries in Africa to strengthen our capacities on our borders so as to fight against and to combat terrorism. So let's listen to the choir of the University of Lome, and by then we'll invite the Presidium at the high table to take seat.
This is a way of a summary of the song that we've just listened to, where the choir all the people of Africa, let's commit ourselves for the security of our borders. Because the terrorists want to trouble our peace. Let's mobilize against this danger. We have to pull together our strength to develop our strategies to fight terrorism. Those are the main words of this song.
Différents panélistes à prendre place.
Now, the Honorable Bakuma Jovi is now going to invite the different panel members to take a seat for the next session, which will be our first panel discussion. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le maître de cérémonie.
Thank you, MC. Your Excellency, Madam Speaker of the National Assembly of Togo, Mrs. Your Excellency, Madam Joel Howard-Taylor, Vice President of the Republic and Speaker of the Senate of Liberia, Your Excellency Mr. Duarte Pacheco, President, Speaker of the Interparliamentary Union, Your Excellency Mrs. Mabel Chilomona, President of the African Union, Parliamentarian Union, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, President of or Speaker of the Parliamentarian Assemblies, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, President of institutions of the Republic, Excellency, the former Prime Ministers and former Speakers of the National Assembly of Togo, ladies and gentlemen, members of the government, Mr. Director, Deputy Director of the United Nations Office Against Terrorism, Mr. Representative of the Council of Shura of Qatar, Representative of the Interparliamentarian Committee of G5 Sahel, ladies and gentlemen, member of the diplomatic corps and representative of international organizations, honorable traditional chiefs, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleague parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, representative of civil society and youth organizations, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. I would like to touch upon this topic because it's a planet-wide phenomenon. It was more than urgent to think about it together to be able to face it efficiently. You have understood, and I want to talk about terrorism, extremism, violent extremism that decimate populations and bring desolations everywhere. And so our gratitude to the United Nations Office Against Terrorism, in conjunction with the National Assembly of Togo, the African Interparliamentary Union, the Interparliamentary Union of G5 Sahel, the Shura Council of the State of Qatar. We have today this opportunity that we're given to reflect upon together on this topic, which is becoming more and more unbearable for our states and our populations. I'm going to therefore invite in a few a few minutes this eminent personality to come up to a head table to reflect together on this thematic. So I'm inviting Her Excellency Madame Joelle Howard Taylor, Vice Chair of Vice President of the Republic of Liberia, and Speaker of the House. Please clap for her.
Soyez la bienvenue, Madame la Présidente.
She will be immediately followed by Mr. Duarte Pacheco, President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, sir. His Excellency Honorable Renaud Lopatka, please, under your ovation.
Son Excellence l'honorable Mrs. Leila Dahi.
Excellency Honorable Mrs. Leila Dahi. Please come forward. Please come forward, Madam.
Madame, excusez-moi. Madame Leila Dahi.
Mrs. Leila Dahi is the chairman of the Pan-African Parliamentary Caucus on Youth and members of the House of Representatives of Morocco. Vice Mr. Davide Lompo has to also prepare for his brief presentation in a short while. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, because we have mentioned this, it's a phenomenon that plagues our populations, that brings terror and desolation everywhere. It was important, as Madame the Speaker of the National Assembly of Togo has said, to ask ourselves, what do we do? What can we do? And it is in this optic that we have today hosting here this panel of personality who are going to give us in a short while their impressions, their opinion, and solutions, so that together we could face this phenomenon that troubles so many of our populations. So without further ado, let me ask Madame the Vice Chair of the Republic of Liberia and President of Deputy of the Speaker of the Senate to give us her opinion, her impressions on the topic. Madame Vice Speaker, the floor is yours.
One.
I'd like to greet His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Togo, though he is not here, and to thank him for being supportive of this urgent and important meeting. Her Excellency, Madam Sigan, Speaker of the National Assembly of Togo, officials of the Togolese Parliament, past and present, officials of the Shura Council of the State of Qatar, His Excellency, the President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union and member of the Assembly of the Republic of Portugal, the Honorable President of the Coordination Mechanism of Parliamentary Assemblies, the OSCE, and Vice President of the Ad Hoc Committee on Counter-Terrorism and member of the National Council of Austria, the Honorable President of the IPU Young Parliamentarians Forum and member of the House of Representatives of Egypt, the Honorable Chairperson of the Pan-African Parliamentary Caucus on Youth and member of the House of Representatives of Morocco, other excellencies, officials of the Togolese government, the doyen and members of the diplomatic corps, all other officials that are present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols observed. I am grateful this morning to have this opportunity to join the Speaker of the Togolese Parliament and members of the parliaments from across West Africa and the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism to organize and participate in this landmark conference here in the beautiful Togolese capital. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and the organizers for the kind invitation for the Liberian delegation and I to attend. We are grateful. As we begin this morning, I am reminded of the tens of thousands of victims of terrorism across Africa in general, and in West Africa in particular, and how much havoc and threat it has brought to our lives. In consideration of same, may I ask you to stand with me for a moment of silence for those who have lost their lives in the fight against terrorism. Can you stand for a moment as we consider those who have lost their lives? Thank you. Please be seated. Madam Speaker, Excellencies, members of Parliament, officials of the relevant UN agencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is a fight that we must execute together, with each side playing their crucial roles and providing the requisite responsibilities to turn this situation around. All of the components include parliaments across our region, the executive, the judiciary branch, civil society organizations, and most importantly, a part of it that we do not consider, the family unit, because the families are the hub of how we are rearing our children, and they cannot be left out. Some years ago, this fight against terrorism and violent extremism seemed to be just a fight for national security actors, not taking cognizance of the roles and responsibilities that each segment of our society must play. Thankfully, there is now a new mindset that requires all hands on deck. First in this fight is the parliamentary sector, which are in a crucial position as they have laws and policy-making prerogative. They also allocate resources, they ensure implementation of the programs, and ensure accountability across governments. They are also responsible for putting in place preventative response and sanctioning mechanisms whenever it is necessary. The empowerment of the parliaments and sensitization of each member can actually lead to a transformational shift towards better democratic governance, which can address the grievances feeding violent extremism. In a collective manner, they can work to bring about a critical mass of concrete political actions, enhancing and cementing the existence of a global parliamentary constituency in support of all of the efforts we'll be speaking about today. including stabilization programming, strategic counter-messaging, preventing the recruitment of foreign fighters, stopping financing of those who support violent extremist groupings, and looking at international laws for possible military actions when necessary. Madam Speaker, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, but these measures in themselves are not sufficient to end this wave of extremism and violence which threaten the peace, security, and development of our continent and other continents across the world. Truthfully, nothing justifies terrorism and violent extremism, but we must also acknowledge that they do not arise in a vacuum. Narratives of grievance, actual or perceived injustices, and promised empowerment become attractive whenever human rights are being violated. Good governance is being ignored, and aspirations of our young people continue to be crushed. It is my prayer that at this conference, we will consider all of the conditions which form the basis for extremism and do our best to engender new conditions which propel peaceful coexistence. Some of these conditions include, but are not limited to, bad governance, lack of transparency, high levels of corruption, impunity, economic underdevelopment, inequalities, inequities, marginalization, lack of youth-inclusive policies, lack of proper educational policies which propel innovation and commerce, national authorities' failure to deliver basic, affordable, and accessible public service, our porous borders, fallout from frontline states in the global war on terrorism, and many, many, many other factors continue to breed extremism across our borders. There is also a lack of positive role models across our continent, hopelessness among our young people, injustice, exclusion, abuse, and violence against women and girls. It is clear to see that terrorism and conflict cannot be resolved through enforcement alone. There must be put in place a holistic, well-funded, inclusive campaign at all levels, underpinned by this respect for human rights and backed by strong political will, including strong political will at the family level to ensure that our young people grow up in an environment that shows love, respect for the rule of law, and how people can work with what they have to become whatever they want to be. For the peace, development, and security of all of Africa must remain our top priority, especially as the continent's population is set to explode in a few years. It is therefore imperative that this conference addresses the drivers and enablers of violence which are conducive fuels to terrorism. As we search for the strategic and serious plans to defeat the menace on our doorsteps, I believe we must also consider African solutions to the African problems. Our forefathers dealt with many issues during their time, but they were able to manage all threats to the person, threats to the community, and threats to their society, which kept societies safe, secure, and developed. Madam Speaker, Excellencies, in formulating the processes to eliminate violence, two groups must be mobilized. Women must be fully engaged and empowered, especially as economic drivers, as influencers, and as agents of peace and leaders across our spectrum. This circles back to the center point of gender equality, which is a sine qua non to sustain peace and security, as women make up 50% of our population. The second thing is that we must find practical ways and means to harness the creativity, energies, and power of our young people, to strengthen their resilience against terrorism, and to help build a more just and inclusive society. Keeping in mind, as others have said this morning, that 1.3 billion of our young people are under the age of 35. Nearly half are under the age of 15. There is therefore a critical need to make strategic investment in our young people through increased access to education, which helps Africa harness its vast human and natural resources and provide training and employment opportunities so available around us in the private sector. Indeed, job creation for our young people must be at the center of any strategy for the elimination of violent extremisms. Especially with the rise of misinformation on social media and the internet, young people need information and empowerment that will enable them make the right choices to denounce manipulative narratives, xenophobia, and hate speech. We must never lose focus on the fact that if these two groups are not targeted and plans are not put into place to implement economic empowerment, we run the risk of losing our present and there may be no future. The young men and women of Africa are alert, they are vibrant, they are available, and they want to be a part of the change that Africa needs. This generation of young leaders are the most advanced and educated in our history. Our policies as parliaments must work to empower them to become a force for good and a force for positive and transformational change. Madam Speaker, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my prayer that at this conference, we'll seriously consider ways and means to eliminate violence and extremism across our continent in ways that will work for Africa. We must consider inclusive platforms which will put in place not only just legislation and financing. We must support victims and survivors of terrorism, those who are sexually manipulated and harmed, and children that are now being exploited by terrorist groups, thus putting a human face to those who continue to be a part of the terrorist regime and reduce the damage done to suffering communities, families, and individuals. May I add another angle to this debate for your consideration: the need for all African parliaments to ensure the ratification of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. This is a strong framework for enhanced cooperation across our borders and the industrialization that Africa so needs. This industrialization will provide sustained economic environment for our young people to take advantage of so that they can buy into the new Africa we talk about and be a part of the job creation and enhanced economic opportunities. Sadly, many parliaments have not yet ratified this agreement. This is an opportunity which I believe provides real, tangible, and sustained solution for what we need. Let me now leave you with just one quote from one of our inspirational leaders, from Madiba Nelson Mandela, who said, and I quote, "We must recognize that the world is hungry for action and not words. We must act with courage and vision necessary to create the Africa of our dreams." This conference is a call to action. For act you must, not tomorrow, but today. I wish you a successful deliberation, and may God continue to bless the work that we do for our people. Thank you.
Merci infiniment à Madame la vice-présidente du Libéria.
Our sincere thanks to the Vice President of the Speaker of the Parliamentary of Liberia for her speech. Once again, a round of applause to her.
Vite, Monsieur.
Would like to give the floor to Duarte Pacheco, the Speaker of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, for him to share his view on this topic. Mr. Duarte Pacheco, you have the floor, sir.
National Assembly of Togo. It's a pleasure to be here. Mr. Director of the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, Madam Speakers, Mr. Speakers, dear colleagues, dear friends, allow me to express my thanks for this opportunity to address you all in this meeting as President of IPU. I will share with you some minutes of your time addressing three different items. First, about terrorism. Second, about how to engage youth to fight terrorism. And finally, the role of parliamentarians and the role of IPU. First, about terrorism. Terrorism is like a cancer. It may appear everywhere. In a silent way, it grows. And one day we discover we have it inside our home. And then it is not easy to fight it. It is not easy to fight it. And so we need to fight with all our weapons of the science, of the technology, but also from all kinds of politics. That is essential to fight something that it is not possible to accept. That is not possible to think that someone can defend it like something that can be justified. So terrorism is a cancer and needs to have the opposition of all countries of the world and all parliamentarians. Second, the role of youth. The youth, the young people, are the victims, the more intensive victims of terrorism. Why? Because their future will be affected forever with terrorist attacks. And so it's necessary, since the beginning, to have the youth engage in this fight against terrorism. And education is something essential. Education is something essential. And we parliamentarians, we have a role on that. Because we approve our budget to education in our countries. We approve the programs of education in our countries. And we need to have the confidence that these kinds of programs never will incentive intolerance or extremist ideas. Otherwise, we will have the tools to grow terrorism on the young people. So it is essential. Education. I always say to my children, what I spend with their education was enough to buy maybe a Ferrari. But it was much more important for the future, the education I gave them, than the Ferrari I may let them. And this is one investment that we all should address. Second, we should spread that economic development is essential. Because if young people will not have hope in their future, if they will find a job, if they don't understand what are their role in their own countries, in their own village, in their own cities, they will be available to accept the other kind of ideas that we don't like and that we are fighting for. So, economic development. How to invest, to create the conditions to have the growth of our economies also in Africa. Good governance, fight corruption, accept all kinds of investment that can create jobs, that can give hope. Because if the young people don't find hope, they will not accept that they will have a future. Again, they will be more available to accept extremist ideas. And finally, engage them in politics. You know, here in Africa, we have a lot of young people. In Europe, we are a whole continent right now. But here, I remember I visited some weeks ago East Timor. 70% of the population is below 30. Just 2% of the population of the MPs are below 30. It means that the young people don't feel represented in their own parliament. They don't feel engaged with politics. Because the people that are in the parliament are not representing them, are representing other ideas, not the ideas they defend for their own future. So it's essential to engage the young people in politics, in our parliaments as well. Otherwise, again, they will not feel represented. And if they don't feel represented, they will not believe in democracy, and they will be available to accept extremist ideas. It's essential to have them. And finally, I can say to you, I felt that, personally, when I was elected to my own parliament in Portugal, I was 25 years old. On that time, it happened maybe 3 years ago, not more. I felt that the senators of my country saw me like a child, not someone that are available to contribute to the future of the country. I need to fight a lot. And that's why I agree, and I believe so much on the young participation in politics. Because they are the future of your countries, of our countries. And finally, the role of the young people in politics and the role of IPU. That's very important to know, that IPU was the first international organization to create 9 years ago a forum of young parliamentarians, to give a special role to the young parliamentarians. And we create incentives. You know, when we are going to one assembly, we have limited time because it's not possible to have time to everyone have a speech as they wish. We have a limited time. But we created one incentive. If a delegation of a country includes MPs below 30, this delegation will have more time to expose their ideas. This is one incentive. But we create this forum because the representatives of them are members of the executive committee of our organization. And so the representatives of the young parliamentarians and of the Forum of Young Parliamentarians at the Executive Committee can express the ideas, the projects, the programs, the dreams of the young parliamentarians directly to the old MPs. And we work as a team. And of course, we create also high-level forum to fight terrorism and violent extremism. And this way, we combine all matters that are on the table during these 2 days here. Terrorism, how to fight it, how to engage young people and young parliamentarians to fight it. It is not easy, and we all know. If it was easy, it was done before. But what we need now is, again, action. People are tired of words. People are tired of very nice conferences. People wish actions. And I will call you all. You are parliamentarians. You are not academics. You are not journalists. You have power in your hands. And so, when you came back home, please take action in your parliament. Please take the measures that are essential to fight terrorism, to promote more education, to promote economic development, to have more people represented in your parliament. And this way, we can finish our day saying we did what is necessary to do to fight terrorism. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this
Terrorism.
Thank you so much for this beautiful speech. Without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to the next speaker. I am calling on Madame Sarah Albazar. Madame Sarah Albazar, Speaker of the Forum of the Youth Parliament and members of the Parliament from Egypt, because she wanted to speak. We're talking about the marginalization of the youth. And I think it is important for Madame Sarah, for her to come and share her idea on this issue. Madam Sarah, you have the floor.
Mes excuses à Monsieur Lopatka pour ce changement de dernière minute qui est intervenu.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be with you today as the President of the Forum of Young MPs and the Deputy Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the Egyptian Parliament. First, I would like to thank the National Assembly of Togo for the kind hospitality and great reception. And I also want to extend my thanks for the Shura Council of Qatar, African Parliamentary Union, the G5 Sahel, and the UN Office for Countering Terrorism for their tireless efforts in organizing this conference. Terrorism and violent extremism pose a grave threat to the stability and security of our continent, and youth, who are our future, are the most affected by this threat. Extremist groups often target and recruit youth who are dissatisfied and willing to do anything under the illusion of improving their own circumstances. And the potential recruits typically fall in the age group of 15 to 25 years old. Boys get trained as foot soldiers. Girls captivated as sex slaves, molested, and in some instances married off without their or their parents' consent. So it's essential that we jointly combat terrorism by addressing the underlying causes of terrorism, such as poverty, lack of education, and political marginalization. Therefore, engaging young people in the fight against terrorism starts by providing them with the education and the skills they need to counter their extremist ideologies, as well as giving them a platform to voice their own concerns and ideas. But that's not enough, and it's not only this. radicalization is all around us, offline and online. According to the latest data, 70% of the internet users in Africa are under the age of 35, which means around 238 million of young people in Africa are using internet. Extremists have been using the internet to recruit and radicalize individuals, and it is believed that internet will continue to play a crucial role in recruitment and training. So here is another reason to engage young people in countering the online radicalization and recruitment, because they are more innovative, imaginative, and make full use of their ability to employ social media creatively. Because the challenge is not only imposing violent extremism, but to develop better alternatives for people who are drawn to radical propaganda. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to say enough is enough. We need to stop terrorism from stealing the lives of our young people now. We should come together as countries, parliamentarians, governments, politicians, international organizations to share experiences, best practices, and translate them into actions. In the context of Egypt, for example, to enhance that process of exchanging experiences, His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the Egyptian president, launched the Aswan Forum for Peace and Sustainability, for peace and sustainable development to be an African dialogue platform. In addition of this, Egypt formulated a vision to support our brothers in Africa Sahel region by hosting the Regional Center of Combating Terrorism for Sahel and Sahara countries to enhance military cooperation and exchange experiences with the Sahel countries. Along with these missions, there are Al-Azhar al-Sharif and Egyptian Ministry of Religious Endowments spreading moderate understanding of the religion as way of combating extremist ideologies. Finally, as the president of the Forum of Young MPs, I speak for the youth when I say I cannot stress more on the importance of working together to have less young people as victims and have more young people as change agents. Youth must be seen as an opportunity rather than threat. They should be perceived as important citizens, potential ambassadors for youth, for peace, and leaders in countering terrorism. This is the only way we can help the current situation, and it will not only help to prevent young people from becoming vulnerable to extremists and terrorism, but it will also help to create more stable and secure Africa for all of us. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Saha Al-Mazar. Nous permettent encore de pousser un peu plus dans la réflexion. Avec toutes nos excuses, je vais inviter à présent Monsieur Reinhold Lopatka, président du mécanisme de coordination des assemblées parlementaires, vice-président de l'Assemblée parlementaire de l'OSCE, que je vous demande d'acclamer, s'il vous plaît.
Distinguished colleagues, dear friends, I think it was a good signal and sign that a young woman from Africa spoke before an old white man from Europe. But now it's my turn, and first of all, I would like to thank you, our host, the Parliament of the Republic of Togo, for your hospitality. And I also want to thank the driving force for our work. It is the United Nations Office of Countering Terrorism in Doha. And we have strong partners. One is the African Parliamentarian Union and the G5 Sahel Interparliamentary Committee. And we need these partners and, of course, the support of the Shura Council of Qatar, to say it very direct, to organize such events. And these events are important as a start. And then we need the action, of course, on the ground. We need this support. And together we have to work And when we talk about counterterrorism, and when we talk about the prevention of violent extremism, we should have the young generation in our focus. Because it is very clear, around 30% of the world's population are children and young people under the age of 17. And as we know, Africa is one of the youngest continents with the youngest structure of the population. And as Duarte mentioned before, we had the chance to start with 25 as MPs. Now I am the longest serving in my parliament in a small country, Austria, with 9 million inhabitants. And why did I have the chance? Because we have a system that the parties reserve several seats for young parliamentarians. After each term, when we have our elections, we give young parliamentarians the chance. And the older one, like me, then we have to fight to survive. I had the chance to survive very often, but also young parliamentarians, they take the chance. And on the international level, we try to support young people to get involved in politics. The United Nations, the Interparliamentary Union, and also regional interparliamentary forums are doing this. But the most important thing has to be done on national level. And here all national parliaments have to do their homework. We try to do it in my parliament with several youth-related programs, because we have also radicalization. We have also problems with terror, from far right, also to misleaded young people by so-called religious leaders. We face both. Also in Austria, innocent people were killed by terrorists. And so we try to do this work, and each parliamentarian, if he belongs to a governmental, to a party which is in government, or he or she is member of a party which is in opposition, we have to spend a certain time to work with young people in a so-called democracy workshop. In a small country like Austria, we invite each year between 7,000 and 10,000 young people. They come to our parliament and we work with them, person to person. So they see how politicians are, how they act, and we do this very consequently. It was our first women speaker of my parliament 10 years ago. She started with this work, and I think it is very, very important, because terrorism affects young people. Of course, young people are very often victims of terrorism, but also young people are the first who get radicalized. And when we look to the perpetrators, many of the perpetrators are also young people. So I think the first step have to be to involve young people in our work. Of course, not everyone can become a member of parliament. And we have to have a holistic and integrated approach. And it's too long to mention all, but I want to mention some of these items. I think they are very important. First of all, we should have in mind children's rights. This UN convention is the most signed convention on this planet. But in reality, children need our protection, and we have to do everything to promote human rights. And we have to implement this international legislation in our parliaments. And even it is difficult, we have to strengthen democratic standards. Also in Europe, we have authoritarian tendencies, and we have to see them around the globe. I think it is very important to have in mind we need really functioning democracies. And we have to identify all these fields of discrimination, exclusion, and marginalization among young people. For me, the key is education, free education and educational initiatives, and to stop child labor. This is very important. If we want that our young generation has a future, we have to give them the chance for education. And we have to offer young people a perspective. For me, the most important thing is to give them the chance to work. Employment is very, very important. And of course, we have to support all these initiatives of the civil society who are working with children. And I think it is very important when we speak of counter-narratives and the promotion of tolerance, intercultural and interreligious dialogue, we need the religious leaders on our side. We have to involve them. We have to involve them. And we have to also to use sport. We had the football World Championship soon. We had it in Qatar. And soon we will have other sport events. And we have to use this spirit, because for young people, sportsmen, football players, they are people who are respected by young people. We have to use them for our work. And when we speak of tolerance, sport can play a big role. So what I want to say, and I want to finish with this, all what we are doing, we have to bring it on the local level. We have to bring it to the communities. And here, parliamentarians play a big role. It takes a long time to involve parliamentarians in the work of UN. All these initiatives are not very long-lasting initiatives, but we had a good start. And I am optimistic. But we still have a long, long way to reach our goal. The goal is very simple. We want a future without terrorism. Together we can reach it, but it is a very, very hard work. Thank you very much for your attention.
Des applaudissements pour Monsieur Lopatka, s'il vous plaît. Merci infiniment. La dernière.
Thank you very much. And the last intervention at this level comes to Madame Leila Dali, chairperson of the chairwoman of the Pan-African Parliamentary Caucus on Youth and a member of SU.
First, I'd like to, on behalf of the Association of the Youth of Africa, and on my own behalf, to express our gratitude to the United Nations Office on against terrorism. Our gratitude also goes to the Republic of Togo, which is hosting this conference, and I also express my gratitude to all the different stakeholders who have contributed to the organization of this conference. The Parliamentary of the African Union, of G5 Sahel, the Shura Council of Qatar, and his Honorable Ben Salman, and who have all played a role, or have all been playing a role in the fight against terrorism and violent extremism. Before anything, I'd like to say that I'd like to I salute your participation. How should we bring the youth to participate in this process? And the statistics show that there are more than 40% of the youth on the continent. More than the 40% of the continent is our youth. And we have to think about it to see how we can make youth participate. I think this thematic is very important for the fight against terrorism. I think that my intervention will also focus on we have to work a lot, and rather than make long speeches, I'd like to take the floor here, take the words of Cyril Aren. The United Nations against terrorism. I like to quote them, and this was quoted during the FIBACO in Azerbaijan, and she said that terrorism has a strong impact on the future of the youth, and the youth constitute important potential, and we need to find innovative measures to help youth fight against terrorism and protect this youth and their society. End of quote. I believe that this quote is important, and it's heavy with meaning. When we talk, we see that terrorism is only found in societies where alphabetization and poverty has spread. No society can evolve when there is terrorism, and the causes, unfortunately, are societies that do not have innovative projects for the youth that to mobilize youth. And I believe that we have to plan and have projects so that we can have development of youth and involve them in the management of the public goods. And I believe that today is very important to. We are fed up with this endless speeches. Today we have to take measures, we have to take actions, because the figures, because the statistics and everything, we think that we've done this, we've done that, because unfortunately the gap between the speeches and the action today and the situation of the youth today is really deplorable. This is why today they are the first victims of terrorism. When I speak of Kingdom of Morocco, we are grateful for the efforts made by our countries under the guidance of his the King Mohammed VI. The decisions, the initiatives for the prevention of extremism. I like to quote here international initiatives for the fight against terrorism. This is the reason why our country, Morocco, has taken initiatives and made all the possible efforts to try to effectively fight against terrorism. We have a process of legislation which tries to support the youth so as to make efficient fight against terrorism. We also have associations or financial structures which also participate and do their best to support and initiatives of the Kingdom of Morocco in the fight against terrorism. We also have regions. I think this is an initiative that also creates projects, development projects, innovative development projects, so as to be able to involve the youth in the management of public good. I think that also they create money-generating activities for the youth so as not to leave them at the mercy of terrorism and violent extremism. And I think that this interparliamentary dialogue that I hope that coming out of this interparliamentary dialogue, will come up with recommendations. Because as someone says, we can only have results when we have involved the youth, and we have to involve them. And I believe that if we do not do that, we'll be far away from the realities. And I believe that the African continent is a continent which needs peace, and I thank you for your kind attention.
Pour ces propos assez importants sur cette thématique qui nous occupe ce matin. Mesdames, Messieurs, vous venez de prendre connaissance ainsi des différentes contributions de cette matinée qui nous poussent encore à la réflexion afin d'arriver à obtenir, sinon des réponses ou en tout cas des contributions efficaces pour ce phénomène qui pourrit la vie de nos États, de nos populations.
In the control of this phenomenon that has been hurting or negatively affecting the life of our populations. So what comes out is that it's together that we'll be able to fight against this scourge. And to do this, we have to listen to the youth, to the women, to involve them more and more in public policies. And this is becoming more and more important if we want to have a world of peace, a world in peace, a world of peace, a world in peace. As Madame the Chair, the Speaker of the House of Togo, I just said a short while ago. Thank you.
Merci pour vos différentes contributions. Les travaux se poursuivent pendant 2 jours.
Thank you for your different contributions. The proceeding will go on for 2 days. We're now going to invite you to go and take family pictures. We are acknowledging the arrival of the President of the National Council of the Republic of Guinea. This brings us to the end of the first panel. We're now going to take a few minutes to take the family picture. The family picture, which will be for the people on the podium, the members of the Assembly of Togo, and the diplomatic missions. And the pictures will be taken at the entrance. The pictures will be taken here in the hall. A few minutes to set the stage for the picture, and then once we do this picture, we would like to remind all the delegations that are here present that if they need any press conference, the hall, the Evala Hall, which is right across from this building, is organized for or is set up for this press conference. So thank you. We're now going to invite all the speakers of the opening ceremonies, the panel members, the Bureau of the National Assembly of Togo, the Diplomatic Corps, to please all get together for the family picture. And then we're going to invite all the participants that are present to come join us. We hope that from logistically we'll be able to do this. So, picture time.
Et juste après la photo, la pause café.
And right after the picture time, we'll have the coffee break that will be served in the mezzanine.
Au Togo pour la photo de famille. Alors, permettez-nous, nous allons respectueusement prier les officiels de nous permettre de déployer une estrade qui facilitera la prise de photos, s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît, nous vous prions de bien vouloir permettre le déploiement d'une estrade qui facilitera la prise de photos.